Early on in episode 2, we see Joel, Ellie, and Tess in a salon after they've left the QZ. When Ellie wakes up, we see Joel and Tess watching on her intently. But if you look in the corner of the room, we perhaps have a little bit of foreshadowing for something that happens with Ellie in the future, specifically the second game. If you zoom in on the picture, to me, it looks a lot like Dina, who we know becomes very close with Ellie in episode 2. This might just be me, but to me, this looks like an artist's rendition of the character. We all know that the first 2 episodes of The Last of Us on HBO are chock full of Easter eggs. One such might be this.
It's like a fucked up moon. Is this where they bombed?
Yeah.
Now, in and of itself, it's not a big Easter egg, but knowing what happens in The Last of Us Part 2, we know that Ellie becomes enamored with space and space travel.
You know how many times we've been to the moon?
Twice.
6 times.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm gonna make it 7.
This is yet another example of the attention to detail displayed by the creators of The Last of Us on HBO. One key difference between this episode and the game is how Joel begins to believe that Ellie is actually infected. In the show, we see that she receives a cut or a bite of some kind during their fight in the museum.
You fucking kidding me? I mean, if it was gonna happen to one of us.
In the game, however, due to the presence of spores, every time you come across a place where an infected has died, you're required to put a mask on. But in the game, we see that Ellie doesn't have a mask and breathes in a ton of spores, where Joel is shocked to see that the spores don't take her down. He even remarks that how is she breathing in the spores, where she reiterates that she's immune.
How the hell are you breathing in this stuff?
I wasn't lying to you.
Though there is a difference in how the game and episode show Joel that Ellie is in fact immune, the end result is the same. He begins to believe that she may be in fact worth saving. And in the grand scheme of things, this is perhaps the first big crack in the facade that Joel has been putting up thus far. One small but very key detail between Tess and Ellie after the museum in episode 2, we see Tess walking at a very brisk pace with her thumbs wrapped inside the straps of her backpack, while Ellie, walking behind her, is walking with her arms swinging free. Now, at first glance, this may not appear to be special, but we know that in fact the infection begins to show itself by tremors, shakes, and the degradation of fine motor skills. Now, this may in fact be the first evidence that Joel misses because he's paying so much attention to Ellie, but Tess is trying to hide the fact that she's been bit, while Ellie has nothing to hide, so her arms are swinging free, and in fact she doesn't have the shakes. So this is one more small detail with The Last of Us Episode 2. I've seen a lot of confusion on the internet regarding the classifications of infected in The Last of Us on HBO. So let's clear that up. The first stage is called a runner, and these are basically the newly infected we've seen in episodes 1 and 2. They are angry, confused, and oftentimes in the games when they're not being active, you can see them off in a corner crying because the person is still inside there. Kind of terrifying. The second stage is a stalker, and these are the intermediate stage in between the runner and the clicker. You can hear some clicks coming from them occasionally, but normally they can see from at least one eye. This is also the type of infected that kissed Tess at the end of episode 2. The third stage is where they really get terrifying. The clicker is a form of infected where the parasite has burst from the skull and has destroyed the eyes, thus leaving the infected completely reliant on clicks. But what these infected lack in seeing, they make up for in strength. You do not want them to get your hands on you because they will rip you into pieces. The fourth and final type of infection is a bloater, which is basically a clicker on steroids. They're big, armored, and the cordyceps has replaced most of the flesh of the infected with itself. These guys are basically tanks. They can take a lot of damage, they're slower, but they pack a huge punch. There's another type of infected called the shambler, but I do not think we will see these in Season 1, as we only saw them in Part 2 of The Last of Us video game. Hopefully this will help clear up some of the confusion.